Alan Gross is an American contractor who was working to set up internet in Cuba, and it was internet that bypassed Cuban censorship. So he was there illegally, and he was doing this illegal action, and he was caught, and he was basically a political prisoner, and he was sentenced to 15 years in jail. So this was something that already hurt the already bad relations between the U.S. and Cuba, which have been terrible since the 1960s. Well, today we get the news that Alan Gross will be released in return for the U.S. releasing 3 Cuban prisoners. So this is fantastic news, and in fact, I believe that in Cuba they're not only releasing Alan Gross, there's also somebody who is a Cuban who was a spy in Cuba, a U.S. spy in Cuba who's going to be released. But the news actually gets better, believe it or not. Huffington Post is reporting, quote, American officials say the U.S. and Cuba will start talks to normalize full diplomatic relations as part of the most significant shift in U.S. policy toward the communist island in decades. Officials say the U.S. is also looking to open an embassy in Havana in the coming months. The agreement includes normalizing banking and trade ties with Cuba. So, they already said that as of right now, I think you're able to send $500 to Cuba if you're a Cuban and you live in the U.S. So there's many restrictions on if you can send money back and, if you can visit and all this stuff. And they're relaxing these rules big time. So now I think the number went from $500 to $2,000 that you can send. Like they said here, we're going to add our own embassy in Cuba, and it looks like we're going to try to normalize trade relations and banking relations. And there was an article earlier today that said now you'll be able to get those famous Cuban cigars, and it won't necessarily be illegal. So it's a giant step in the right direction. I should also add, though, that the embargo is currently still there, and it will take an act of Congress to get rid of the embargo. Now, this was a brilliant move from President Obama, though, because he's basically forcing their hand. He came out and gave this speech today and talked about how we're now normalizing relations with Cuba, and this is going to be fantastic, and the policies of the past have failed, and now it's a new day, and this all started before I was born and before so many Americans were born, so why would we continue fighting like this? He even brought up the fact that, well, we're mad at them because they're communists, supposedly. Well, we do business with China all the time. They're communist. I mean, just nail on the head, a perfect point. It's a point that I've been making for years and other people have been making for years. So he's now put pressure on Congress by making this a spectacle and by basically getting everybody excited over it. And the American people are happy about it. And, the news agencies were reporting it and saying, hey, look, this is a big breakthrough. It's basically a peace deal. So you're forcing Congress to do the right thing. Now, we still don't know if they will do the right thing because, for example, Marco Rubio is like, I'll block it. I'll do whatever I can to block it. So there are going to be people standing in the way, but that just makes them look stupid and makes President Obama look good. And, I mean, stop and think about it, man. Who can really be in favor of the embargo? It's not really about, hey, they're communist and we don't like communists. Because, again, we work with China. We work with other people who are communists. So what does it really boil down to? I'll tell you. The U.S. was pissed. You have to know the history of Cuba in order to understand the Cuban Revolution and understand why the U.S. is salty about it. I mean, in the 1950s, Cuba was like this go-to vacation spot for the elite in America. It was like our little colonized area. And then finally, the people of Cuba said, fuck this. We don't want your corporations. We don't want your shitty music. We don't want your, over-the-top white people who are condescending and annoying. We don't want this to be your vacation spot. We want to have our own independent nation. So they did a revolution. Fidel Castro tried, and he finally got it to work. And then they set up a government that we didn't agree with ideologically. But it didn't matter if they set up their system to be capitalist. It didn't matter if they copied the U.S. Constitution and implemented it there. The reason we were mad is that our corporations were mad and our elites were mad because this was like a colony of the U.S. and then there was a revolution. So we were like, okay, embargo, sanctions, crack down on them. I mean, if you look at different documentaries about Cuba, you'll see how multiple times we tried to overthrow the government. The Bay of Pigs is on the record. We know about it, and we know about other attempts too, and they all failed. So this is a situation that's very similar to U.S. relations with Iran, because in that situation, Iran is right. Now, of course, I don't agree with how fundamentalist and how religious the revolution was and how religious the government is, and that makes it easy to demonize them. But the reality is, from a practical perspective, they were right, because we had a puppet government in there. We had a dictator in there who was giving us their oil for very cheap. And along came a democratically elected leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, who said, I'm going to nationalize the oil industry and give the money to the people of Iran. And then the U.S. flipped out and said, no, we can't have that. So they overthrew the democratically elected government. The CIA did, to be specific. And then they put in the Shah. So it's our fault. Like, we pissed them off. We were meddling in their affairs, and we created the problem, and then we bitch about it afterwards. It's the same thing in Cuba. And then the cover story is, oh, no, Fidel Castro is a terrorist. He's just a bad guy, and it's communism. We don't agree with communism. And then they make up some bullshit about how they're going to invade the U.S. and turn us communist. Look at a map. Look at a map. Look at the size of the United States. Look at the size of Cuba. And you tell me whether or not you think they could overthrow the U.S. They can't overthrow Tuscaloosa, Alabama, never mind the entire United States. So all the arguments are total and utter bullshit. And I have to say, man, I have gone after Obama a million different ways. Everybody who listens to the show knows that. I hate his drone program. I hate how on foreign policy, in many respects, he's too hawkish. He's like George W. Bush. I hate how he's, I think, sold out way too much to the bankers, and he caves way too much to the right wing. But you have to give credit where credit is due. Thus far, Obama deserves nothing but credit for how he's dealt with Iran and how he's now dealing with Cuba. And if there's people standing in his way, man, look out. We'll bulldoze right over them, because on this, he's 100% right, and the American people are going to back him.